Hey y'all, welcome to a new What's for Dinner. So first up, I made a chicken bacon ranch, like cheesy sheet pan meal with broccoli and potatoes, and it was absolutely incredible. Definitely exceeded my expectations, so let me show you how I did it. So I started by taking a few russet potatoes and I just washed them really well and diced them up. I decided to leave the skins on because we like that, but you could of course peel it if you wanted to. I drizzled them with some olive oil and then I went in with some ranch seasoning. I prefer to buy the bottles versus the packets just because I use it pretty often and it's just more cost effective that way. I also went in with some Lawry seasoned salt, garlic and onion powder, and some black pepper. I like to go heavy on the seasonings when it comes to potatoes because, well, that's just who I am. So I whipped out my sheet pan and I'm spraying it with some like vegetable oil cooking spray, and I'm going to add my potatoes to like half of the sheet pan. I decided to let them cook first, like by themselves, without adding anything else to the pan because I knew that these would need a longer cook time. Potatoes take quite a while, and I'm pretty particular with my potatoes. Like, I don't want any bite to them. I want them to be perfectly tender. So I cooked them at 400 for 20 minutes before adding anything. Now to that same bowl, I've added in some washed, like fresh broccoli that I cut up, and I'm just going to season it the same exact way. There's not much in here because honestly, no one in the family will eat it other than me. I absolutely love it, and there are certain ways that I can sneak it into things and they'll eat it, but when it comes to like eating it by itself like this, they definitely will not touch it. So yeah, that's why there's so little of that. I just kind of scooted my potatoes on over so that everything would fit, and I'm putting my broccoli in the middle, as you can tell. And then again, to the same bowl, I'm adding in 2 boneless skinless chicken breasts that I have cut into little bite-sized pieces. And again, you guessed it, I'm seasoning it the same exact way. I also think that this would be amazing with like boneless chicken thighs that are chopped up. In fact, I think I'll try that next time. I bet it would be even better. So yeah, I'm going to stir that on up and I'm going to add that to the last section of the sheet pan, spreading it out so that it'll cook more even. And then lastly, here's the game changer to this recipe. You're going to want to take like 4 to 5 slices of bacon, dice it on up, and then just kind of strategically place it all over this dish. This adds so much flavor. I was worried about the bacon like not getting cooked enough. And it kind of looked like it didn't even when it was all like done cooking, but as we were eating it, like it was perfectly cooked, so there was no problems. So I popped that in the oven for 20 minutes and then I pulled it on out, took my tongs out, and I'm just kind of moving everything around, kind of rotating everything. And then lastly, I'm just going to take some shredded cheese and add it over everything. I believe I was using like a Colby Jack blend here, but literally any cheese would be delicious on this. So I'm just going to pop that in for a final 10 minutes, and then I just served it up in some bowls, and it was a huge hit with everyone. Definitely a 10 out of 10. I did not expect to love it as much as I did. It's been forever since I've done a sheet pan meal, and if anyone was wanting to try one, this is the one I would recommend. And that broccoli was literally the best broccoli I've ever had. Up next is a TikTok viral recipe that I've been seeing everywhere, and I've really wanted to give it a try. And I'm sure there'll be some hateful comments because the main ingredient is these frozen beef taquitos. But by all means, if that's not your cup of tea, just make you some homemade beef taquitos and we can still be friends. No need for the judgment. But yeah, to a 9x13 casserole dish, I've just sprayed it with some nonstick cooking spray, and I'm just organizing these to fit into the bottom of my dish. And you'll want to pre-bake these according to the box directions. I believe it's like 400 for 13 minutes, something like that. But here they are after they came out. They were smelling good. They're nice and crispy. And I'm just going to take some enchilada sauce and drizzle it all over the top. I recommend getting just the normal size can because I did have quite a bit left over. And this is the first time I bought this brand, and I honestly didn't care for it. It's kind of had like an off taste to me. I was trying to save some money, but I wouldn't buy it again. So yeah, now I'm just going to add some shredded cheese, and I'm just going to pop that in the oven again at 400 for like 15 minutes. You just want to wait for your cheese to get nice and melted. And you know, you could also do like the chicken and cheese ones. That would also be really good. And if you wanted to make it meatless or vegetarian, you could do like the bean ones. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to show how these came out really well, like they didn't fall apart or anything. And I just topped it with some sour cream and some some lettuce and tomatoes with a pinch of salt on the tomatoes to bring out that flavor with a lime wedge on the side. And other than the enchilada sauce not being our favorite, we actually really enjoyed it, and I would definitely make it again. So if you are looking for a super easy dinner one night, here you go. I would definitely recommend it. And I just served it with some homemade Mexican rice, the same recipe I always use, and some refried beans. I love how colorful this dish was. The next day, I made a chicken Cordon Bleu Crescent ring with like a traditional Cordon Bleu dipping sauce. And this recipe is inspired by a girl named Danielle on TikTok. I couldn't pronounce her last name, but if it'll let me, I will link her video in my description box. And if not, I'll just write out her name and y'all can go look her up yourself. So I started by whipping out a cast iron skillet, and I'm just placing a small bowl in the middle. And I'm going to be using 2 8-count cans of crescent rolls, and I'm just going to form that around the bowl. So if you don't have a cast iron skillet, you could totally do like a baking sheet, pizza pan, anything really that would fit this. But if you do have a cast iron, I highly recommend using it for this, and I'm going to explain for a little bit. So on Wednesdays, the kids will go to their grandparents' house for a few hours, which is just next door. But Josh has somewhat recently started working day shift, which is a big change for us because most of our relationship, he's always worked night shift. So we do get a little bit more time together now, and I wanted to take the opportunity to kind of turn this into a little bit of a date night. So, we watched a movie and we sit this in the middle of the coffee table and just kind of sat there and grazed at it. And the cast iron skillets, they hold heat super well, so that whole time it was keeping that sauce in the middle like steaming hot. Like it reminded me of like a fancy cheese fondue at a restaurant, and then of course too, it just kept the food really warm the whole time throughout that movie as we were sitting there and just kind of picking at it. I do consider this kind of like an appetizer type dinner, but yeah, so that's my reason for using the cast iron. So on the bottom, I used some Swiss cheese, and then I layered on some Black Forest ham. If you wanted to, you could close it up at that point, and I'm sure it would be super good as just like a ham and cheese crescent ring. But I took it a little bit further, and I did shred up a rotisserie chicken, and I'm just adding that on top of the ham, and then I'm just going to add a final layer of that Swiss cheese. And now I can take all of the dough that's just flapped on over that skillet, and I'm just going to fold it on over those toppings, just kind of like tucking it under the best that I could. And if you wanted to make this like super golden brown, you could take like an egg wash to it, but since there was so much filling like kind of popping through the crescent rolls where I like really filled it up, I was afraid that the eggs would scramble. So I just took some like spray butter that I've had forever in my fridge, and I just squirted that on, and then last minute I decided to add on some of the Lawry's garlic salt, and that added like the perfect touch. Really recommend that. And I cooked that at 400 degrees for about 20 minutes, and then I just put that same bowl that I used to form the dough around in the middle. Did have to wash it afterwards because it was looking a little rough since all that dough had touched it. But then I just added in the sauce, and all that is a combination of butter, flour, milk, Dijon mustard, and some Parmesan cheese, and a little bit of salt. And I will definitely leave that recipe linked in my description box if you are interested. So here's the little date night setup. I also served it with some like crinkle cut French fries that I just threw in the air fryer. And Josh picked out this movie, Halloween Party. Scary movies are my favorite. That movie was a little weird, not necessarily recommending it, but it was a nice, like, cozy evening, good food, and good company. Up next is this tortellini soup, which is basically like a vegetable soup with some tortellini added. And you'll definitely want this recipe on hand with the cooler months ahead. If you know me at all, you know I'm a huge soup lover. So we have it year round in this house. And my kids also are just like me when it comes to that. So anyways, I've got my Dutch oven and I'm just cooking up 1 pound of ground beef. The recipe that I was looking at actually used like Italian sausage. I'm unfortunately not like a fan of that, and neither is anyone else in my family. I've tried it a few times, but anyway, so halfway through, I season it the way I always do with some salt, pepper, onion, and garlic powder. I drained the grease, and then I added some olive oil into my pot, and I threw in about 3 carrots that I've peeled and chopped, as well as some diced celery. And celery freezes really well if you don't know, so I love to keep a bag of that on hand in my freezer. Makes it really easy to add to soups. So I just cooked that around for like 6-7 minutes until it started to get tender, and then I added in some minced garlic and some Italian seasoning and let that go for like another minute or so. Then I'm going to add in 2 cans of diced tomatoes, just the regular size cans. And if you're not a fan of like chunks of tomato in your soup, I get it. I used to be that way. You could just use extra tomato sauce. I did add in 1 cup of tomato sauce, as well as 3 cups of chicken broth. Then I tossed on in that drained and cooked ground beef. I did use a low sodium chicken broth, so I did add in some Lorry seasoned salt, and I waited for that to come up to a low boil, and then I turned it down. I'm going to add my lid, and you'll want to cook that until your carrots are tender. It took about like 20 to 25 minutes. Then here is the tortellini that I use. It's the tricolor kind from Kroger. I love it. I think it's perfect. I love the colors of like the orange and the green. It's perfect for fall time. So I'm definitely going to go and stock up on some more bags of that. Last minute, I did decide to add in some like random frozen vegetables that I had left over. So just the smallest amount of broccoli, a little bit of the frozen corn, and then I just threw in that whole bag of the tortellini. And I cooked that for like 5 or 6 minutes, I would say. And that was literally it. It was really easy, super good. We all really enjoyed it. This is one way that I can always get my kids to eat vegetables. And I just served it with some garlic breadsticks. For the last recipe that I'll be sharing in this video, I'm making some creamy bacon ranch pork chops, and I just kind of made this up on a whim, so I will definitely write this recipe out in the description box. So I took a pack of pork chops and added that to the bottom of my crock pot. I'm seasoning both sides with some onion and garlic powder and pepper. So you'll need a can of cream of bacon. The only place that I can find this is the Dollar General, of all places, and also some ranch seasoning mix. So I'm just going to dump out that cream of bacon into my bowl, and since I don't have a packet of ranch, I'll need to measure out 3 tablespoons of the ranch mix, and I'm just going to stir that together. If you wanted this to be thinner, you could add some milk here, but we like it thick, so I just leave it as is. And plus the pork chops will put out juice as it's cooking. So I'm just going to plop that on top of the pork chops and take the back of my spoon, and I'm just going to spread that into an even layer. And then I'll pop my lid on. And for me, I have learned with like that size of pork chops, it usually takes about 3 hours on low. So that's what I set my timer for, but I checked them around the 2 hour and 40-minute mark with a meat thermometer, and they were cooked. They were actually above what they needed to be. So I always try to be super careful when it comes to the pork because I don't want it to be dried out, but these were cooked perfectly. So there's my pork chop. I put plenty of that gravy over top, and I sprinkled it with some pepper and parsley because I just didn't like how like bland it was looking. And I served it with some mashed potatoes with plenty of that gravy over the top, some corn, and a garlic knot. And this meal was super, super good. I know that it's high in sodium. This isn't something that I would have like often, but I'm telling y'all, it's good, and y'all should try it. So I just kind of wanted to cut into the pork chop just to show you that, you know, they were fully cooked, even with that like short cook time for a crock pot. Yeah, so as you can see, there's no pink to it. It looks nice and juicy, not dried out at all. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next one.